So let's rewind the clock a couple of years here. Back in the middle of the pandemic, December of 2020, Warner Brothers Pictures announced that they were going to give all of their 2021 films simultaneous releases both in theaters and HBO Max. It was basically a method to come up with a way to combat the COVID-19 pandemic and to also make their movies actively available for people that were subscribing to HBO Max. Now, Christopher Nolan, one of our most well-known and celebrated filmmakers of today's age, had long partnered with Warner Brothers. His relationship with them goes all the way back to Insomnia in 2002. That's basically the movie that was an audition for him to get the Batman Dark Knight trilogy. And he made pretty much every subsequent film with that studio. But he was really, really pissed off at their decision to make these releases in 2021 simultaneous day and date releases. Now, it's important to note that his most recent movie, Tenet, had already come out in 2020. He decided to be an active proponent to release it in the middle of the pandemic, give it a theatrical run. I remember seeing that film in Chicago when that was really the only way I could see it. There were no theaters open in New York for even us to go check it out together. But he was actively making sure that that movie had a theatrical release. But he was very pissed off at the decision, even though his movie had already dropped. I remember after this all dropped and came out, he made a statement directly to the Hollywood Reporter and said this, quote, "Some of our industry's biggest filmmakers and most important movie stars went to bed the night before thinking they were working for the greatest movie studio and woke up to find out that they were working for the worst streaming service," end quote. Very scathing words. Ooh. For a studio that he had long partnered with. I mean, he had made so many movies for them. He made so much money for Warner Brothers. He was pretty much establishing himself as the 21st century Stanley Kubrick, this one filmmaker who was going to just make all of their movies with one studio. And so he decided to go ahead and take all of his business over to Universal Pictures for his next feature film. He left Warner Brothers in September of 2021, and he had been meeting with other studios about his next project, which was going to be a biopic about J. Robert Oppenheimer, the man who created the atomic bomb. Eventually, Universal acquiesced and decided to meet all of his demands, which I'm going to read off a list of Chris Nolan's demands because it's kind of crazy that he's able to get away with this, but he's one of probably 5 filmmakers who can walk into a studio and say, I want this, this, and this, and they grant him everything that he asked for. So he basically asked for a production budget of $100 million, an equal marketing budget, an exclusive theatrical window ranging from 90 to 120 days. That's basically to combat exactly what HBO Max and Warner Brothers had previously done. He also wanted 20% of the film's first dollar gross and a 3-week period before and after the film's release in which Universal could not release another new film. So they couldn't put out any sort of counter programming or another film to coincide with the release of this new movie. And so by October of 2021, they set a release date for Oppenheimer, July 21st, 2023, which historically Chris Nolan has taken that 3rd week in July for a lot of his movies. Right. Now, in addition to that, the Barbie movie had also been in development. They have been making this movie and trying to make this movie since 2009. Sony Pictures acquired the rights in April of 2014. At one time, Amy Schumer was going to star as Barbie, and then later, Anne Hathaway was cast in the role, but eventually those plans fell through, and the rights were eventually transferred over to Warner Brothers in October of 2018. Margot Robbie eventually signed on and was cast shortly thereafter, and by April of 2022, Warner Brothers was moving forward with active production on the film and decided that they would also release Barbie on July 21st, 2023, having it directly compete against Oppenheimer, probably one of the pettiest moves in the history of Hollywood, but we can tell exactly what they were doing. They were pissed that their boy decided to leave and go to Universal, and so they said, we're going to go directly head-to-head with you. Now, what I want to ask you before we dive really deep into this conversation, once we found out that both Barbie and Oppenheimer were going to release on the same day, I mean, this has happened before in terms of studio strategy and finding release dates. We've seen movies land on similar release dates before, but oftentimes movies would then shift release dates because conventional wisdom tells us you don't want 2 blockbusters competing against each other. You want to create enough real estate and enough time in between blockbusters for yourself as you can to make sure you can make the most money at the box office as possible. Did at any point before all of this craziness started, before the Barbenheimer explosion occurred across social media and across the internet, did you ever believe that one of these studios and one of these movies would actually flinch and say, we're going to go ahead and move our movie to another release date?
Absolutely. I absolutely thought that. These were, at the time when we find out again that these movies exist, you're like, there's no way that both of these movies keep the date. It's just how it goes for the most part. You know what I mean? Just how it works. Even what was that example that I seen somewhere last week. It was like The Dark Knight and Mamma Mia came out on the same day. You know what I'm saying? But those don't feel like this. It doesn't feel like this at all. Those felt very, I think just detached from the situation that we have here. They don't. Mamma Mia to me is a big movie, but not like a knock your socks off blockbuster kind of thing that Barbie was attempting to be. And that Barbie, the name, is really given to me, in my opinion. And so I just knew somebody was going to move that date. I just knew, shoot, probably Barbie, because Christopher Nolan's fucking hard-headed. I just knew Barbie was gonna move at some point to a different day, especially because the summer was, again, at this time we didn't know what the summer was going to look like completely yet, right? Of course, now the summer is absolutely ridiculous. A lot of movies coming out, but at the time it felt open. It felt like, of course, Barbie could move their movie a couple weeks before, a couple weeks after. You know what I mean? It felt like something that was definitely plausible that could be done, and they end up not doing it. I don't know. It's the craziest thing in the world. But yeah, I can't say that I've seen this coming from a mile away. Just because of the way everything works. Again, the way Universal works, the way, to me, that Sony was going to work. I thought Sony would budge here, even potentially, to say, let's come out during, I don't know, the first week, start the summer off. You know what I'm saying? First week in June. I can see that happen. I can see Barbie absolutely coming out this first week of June, but I love the pettiness and I'm happy. I think that we're here overall, man. I think we've got everything we wish for, but I really liked the route they decided to take and say, you know what, we're going to do this thing. And something else about it, I think, of course, all these studios are always in competition. Everybody is always in competition, but nobody is like, nothing ever quite feels like the Super Bowl when it comes to the movies, because how often people move dates, because how we witness James Cameron come out with Avatar and everyone's like, December, I am not touching December at all. You know what I mean? Versus this very much feels like a wrestling beef. This is SummerSlam. You know what I'm saying? Like they are going head to head. Nobody's pulling punches. This is very clearly eye to eye. This is war. And it just hasn't, we never really get this. And so it was pretty cool to see. It was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I think you talked about it exactly, that studios rarely take this type of risk. Anytime a studio all of a sudden sees a competitor place a movie on a similar release date, somebody's eventually moving. That's just what history tells us and teaches us, because all of these studios and these executives obviously want to maximize whatever the box office returns are going to be. And of course, we know that counter programming is an active strategy in the movie industry. It happens literally dozens of times a year where you'll get a big tentpole summer release, but then alongside that, you might get a smaller independent movie to come out. You might get a horror movie to come out. You might get a romantic comedy. That's basically to present an entirely different audience an option for when they go to the movies, in case they don't want to see the latest Marvel flick. It happens all the time, but when you take Barbie and then you place it against Christopher Nolan, now that feels like, well, wait a second. There's no way that these can actually come out together on the same day, right? Like they're gonna move. Somebody's gonna flinch. And I thought the same thing. I thought that somebody eventually was gonna move, and I had predicted that possibly Warner Brothers and Barbie would decide to go ahead and just shift their release date to really just, sort of maybe mend the fence in case Chris Nolan ever wanted to come back to WB one day. In case they wanted to reestablish that relationship, they'll say, you know what, Chris, we're thinking long term. We'll give you the runway. We'll find another date to have this happen. But they said, no, fuck that. We believe in exactly what we have. We're going to go head to head with you. We're going to make sure that this is a rivalry. And ultimately, it turned out to be better for both of them, as we see now and as we'll get into. But you sort of mentioned like the previous history of movie release pairings. The Dark Knight, Mamma Mia, that's probably the most famous one that happened back in July 2008. I want to read off a couple of other ones. All the way back in 1982 in June, you had Blade Runner and The Thing come out on the same Friday. 1995, a couple of really interesting ones happened. On November 22nd, Toy Story and Martin Scorsese's Casino came out on the same weekend. And then later that year, you had Jumanji and Heat, which came out in December 15th of 1995. And then you fast forward to 1999, The Matrix and 10 Things I Hate About You came out. And then most recently, one of the big ones in November of 2013, you had The Hunger Games Catching Fire and Frozen come out. Now, the consistent thing amongst all of these pairings, and there's more, this is just like a few of the key ones that stood out, but the consistent thing that you'll see mostly across the board is that these pairings are two movies that are very dissimilar. They don't really have that much in common. You look at Toy Story, an animated feature film about toys who come alive, paired with a gangster movie by Martin Scorsese, it's like, yeah, there's nothing in common about these two. That is the pure definition of counter programming. You fast
Right.
forward to now and you look at this Barbenheimer phenomenon, which has just taken over culture for the past couple of months, especially the past few weeks in particular. And
Mm-hmm.
something is different. This is not like anything we've seen before. You can look at all these movie pairings, even The Dark Knight Mamma Mia, which was a little bit of a moment, but it's not
Yeah,
matching the levels of what Barbenheimer has
exactly.
achieved. What do you
Mm-hmm.
attribute to that? Why is this Barbie and Oppenheimer showdown such a prevalent force in pop culture and in the zeitgeist, as opposed to some of these other pairings that have happened in the past? Because this is not unusual per se, but what we're
Right.
experiencing on the outside of the movies and the build up and the hype around them, this absolutely is unusual.
Man, I think there's so many reasons to all of this, man. One is the thing we've been talking about, the pettiness between Christopher Nolan leaving and the studio stuff. That's definitely a thing. Two, I have to say, I think it is the pandemic, and the ramp up for the pandemic has helped for sure. I think over the past couple years, since people have been getting back into the theaters, there has been a hunger for just movies in general. I think I think we have been noticing some of these blockbusters, whether good or bad, have been doing pretty well and getting really good numbers, right? Even the top of the summer, you talk about Guardians and Across the Spider-Verse, which is like, oh, people are going to the movies again. People are actually showing up. So it feels like there's an appetite for these things. Three, the comedy of it all. You just said how different Oppenheimer and Barbie are. They're two completely different movies, and it's funny in that way. But not only that, but the directors that are attached to them are important. Christopher Nolan, that boy know how to make a movie, regardless. You know what I'm saying? Every movie ain't perfect. Don't get me wrong. Christopher Nolan, like you said, is one of our most celebrated directors that we have today. No matter what the heck was going on, Christopher Nolan, there's going to be some butts in the seats. That just is what it is. And then you tell me Greta Gerwig is across the street. Greta Gerwig, who's been also putting out bangers. Her bangers are a little more quiet just because of the kind of movies she makes, right? She's not out here like Christopher Nolan is out here making real bombs and shit. Greta Gerwig isn't necessarily doing that, but she is putting out bangers. She is getting Oscar nominations. She is using Saoirse Ronan in movies. You know what I'm saying? She is coming out with, like, didn't she do Little Women? She is doing like all of these movies. You know what I mean? And so it's not only the kinds of movies these are, but these are two heavy hitters. Neither one of them are out here making bad movies. Really, their track records are phenomenal, and so it's like I think that piques people's interest though too. Last thing I'll say, there is something in the energy of the meme. You know, I kind of talked about how funny it was, but there is something in the energy of the meme. Now people are like, okay, I really wanted to see Barbie, but now Oppenheimer is kind of over here. I kind of feel like I need to watch this too because of the memes, because of all the craziness. I mean, me and you were in Oppenheimer, right? The day after Barbie, there was a ton of pink in Oppenheimer sitting next to us. I was like, what is going on? Like, people are really serious about this double header thing. And so it's so many reasons. Last thing I'll say, it probably has nothing to do with this, but growing up, I used to go to the drive-in a lot. And the drive-in always showed two movies, and
They
they were
did.
always two completely different. I'm pretty sure it was like, I forgot what movies. I'm pretty sure it was like the first Batman, not the first Batman, but what's the movie?
Oh,
Batman
Batman
Begins,
Begins. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
in like Doctor Doolittle or something crazy at some point. and we went to go see it though, right? And it was like, dang, these are two completely different movies, but you still have an appetite, to kind of see both. And so again, kind of unrelated, but it is something about the nature of these two completely different things that people still remain interested in. It's again perfect competition, bro, and it's like they just got it. They just got it. And Barbenheimer happens to fall under all those things. It's funny. It's attached to good directors. It's attached to big studios. It's attached to a lot of funny memes. We're all laughing leading up to this. I have to add a 6 point now, because how could I forget this? The goddamn marketing for these movies are through the roof.
Oh, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. There's plenty to
I'm
talk
holding it.
about.
I'm holding it. Yeah, I'm holding it. But that is the 6 point though too, is like, people, the visibility of it all, I think, is also just really important. And so, man, there's a ton of reasons, but I think all of it plays a part for sure.
Batman Begins and Dr. Dolittle, that is the epitome of cinematic whiplash.
Nuts.
What the fuck? I remember going to a drive-in and seeing the Kings of Comedy, the original Kings of Comedy with Bernie Mac, Steve Harvey, and all of them. And then directly after that, Godzilla was playing. Godzilla 2000, something like that. It was like the Tokyo version that was released in America. And I'm like, why are these playing in the same? It didn't make any sense at all. It was just crazy. But you cannot underestimate the power of social media that has played such a pivotal role in the rollout and the release of this entire thing, the organic social media, because yes, the studios have done their work to pay for their dollars to have these large social campaigns, but just the organic nature of it, people taking this and running with it, creating the memes, creating the fan-made posters. There's even this collab of guys on Etsy who made Barbenheimer shirts, and they reportedly made like over $14,000 selling Barbenheimer shirts. I'm sure pretty illegally at that. I saw a guy at the theater that we went to with the Barbenheimer shirt, and I'm like, that can't be official. Nobody's actively making this, but you probably found this on the dark web somewhere. But just the power of social media, TikTok, meme culture, GIFs, all this stuff, bringing these two experiences together, because I don't know if we've ever had two films that are so diametrically opposed as these two movies are. You have on one end a film about a hugely recognizable 60 plus year IP that's this fantasy comedy, candy colored alternate universe style movie that's also fourth wall breaking in its very nature in Barbie. And on the other side of it, you have this 3-hour R-rated biopic about Oppenheimer, who created the atom bomb, one of the most destructive weapons in human history, coming out on the same weekend. It's a recipe for everything that we're seeing exactly over these past few weeks. It's a recipe for all of the memes. It's a recipe for the commentary. It's a recipe for the studies that we're going to do about this for the next few years, because there's so much to take away from how this whole thing bubbled up and how it executed. But you can't remove and underestimate the organic nature of it, because any studio can spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a campaign. That doesn't mean it's going to work. We've seen that countless times. Movies and studios spend all the money in the world and nobody goes and turns out. I mean, there's mad examples this summer alone, especially when we think about that idea of the counter programming and releasing movies on the same date. I mean, we just look at all the films that have come out and pretty much everything is underperforming. You look at last week with Mission Impossible, underperformed. Indiana Jones, The Flash, all these movies are not hitting the numbers that these studios expected them to. Here comes along two, I'm going to put in air quotes, original movies. We haven't had sequels to them. They're not original because they are based off of some previous IP, but we haven't gotten these experiences before in this fashion, in this type of media, which is also another huge contributor. We've never gotten a live action Barbie movie before. We've never seen Chris Nolan tackle a straight up biopic. You know, this is also a brand new thing for him as well. He comes from superhero IP. He comes from making big action movies. Now this is just like a straight drama, you know, so there's a level of intrigue, there's questions, and just the pure nature of these two films being so completely opposite from each other plays absolutely into it. But that does leave us to, I think, the biggest thing that we have to attribute to really just both of the over-the-top humongous successes of these movies, and that is their marketing campaigns. I mean, this is an A+ fucking study on how to market and promote your movies, especially in the case of Barbie, which I think we're going to be talking about their campaign for the next few years, because this is the true winner of the summer. I think the marketing department at Warner Brothers, they're the kings of the box office, because everything that they did and everything that they launched with this campaign, it's really unlike anything else we've ever seen. Now, on one end, you can look at it and say, like, well, it is Barbie. It shouldn't be that hard. I mean, you're working off of 60 years worth of IP from a fashion doll toy line, essentially. Like, how hard can it be? And I think that there's some credence to that. But at the same time, you still have to create wholly original ideas to appeal to new demographics, because just the female demographic who has gravitated towards Barbie all these years is not going to necessarily be enough to put it over the top. You need men to come out. You need young teenagers to come out. You need boys who are going to find some level of interest to this movie, and they were able to tap into that. I want to read off a few quick things that they did to make this just such the phenomenon that it is, but they spent about $150 million reportedly on their marketing budget. So it's huge, but it's, you know, it's pretty standard for a big blockbuster. They had over 100 official brand collaborations, everything from the Airbnb in Malibu, the Dream House, to a special collection with Gap, a collection with Zara. They had a Barbie cheeseburger at a Burger King in Brazil. They did the custom Xbox console, again, reaching out to a new demographic. that probably wouldn't have otherwise seen the movie. I think they did some stuff with Fortnite. I'm looking at my Roku TV right now. They redesigned the Roku City to match the Barbie aesthetic. I mean, they were hitting all corners of everything that they could tie in. And that's just a small fraction of everything that they did. Like I mentioned, over 100 official brand collaborations. We'll talk about Oppenheimer in a second here, but man, what do you just think about just this marketing campaign? It has to be one of the more brilliant ones that we've seen out of any movie, I think, in blockbuster recent memory. What do you think about everything that they launched with this one?
Oh man, of all time, bro. And I think what Barbie has behind it is the property of Mattel, is people who have been literally marketing these dolls and other toys for years and years and years. Because, like you said, movies, there are movie studios who are just marketing stuff, put money into stuff. It's just billboards and the commercials, the things that we normally see. But when it comes to a toy, you got to start thinking different. When it comes to these, you have to start thinking. Not only that, but because this is such a precious IP coming into live action film, there's just so much, I think, on their shoulders in order to get this done correctly and done well at that. And so Barbie, again, it has Mattel behind it. We have to market to people we never thought about marketing to. We have ideas that we know a ton of other people don't have because we are literally a toy brand. It doesn't happen that often. Transformers can try, but I don't know a lot of kids out here playing with Transformers. I do know a lot more kids and girls out here playing with Barbies, if not Barbies, Barbie-esque kind of things on G-dolls and all kind of, you know what I'm saying? And so I think their marketing team was just ready to do something different because the movie also speaks to that. I'm pretty sure a lot of these people did know or have seen the movie or knew the movie synopsis or knew some things about the movie even before marketing in it. And so I think everything just speaks to it's, again, the marketing is crazy. Now I'm thinking about it. It even speaks to the way the movie is, no spoilers, but there's a lot there that they had to do when that they got done, man. And so I also think they intentionally brought in different people, different teams, and people with different internships, people with new ideas, man. The cutouts were fire. You can Google Barbie movie right now. Your screen's going to turn pink. You just talked about all the other kind of things that you talk. There's just so much and so many ideas, but it's all about being intentional. And I think that's the difference. And that's what we'll be studying about this Barbie marketing campaign, is the intentionality of it all. It's not just about how can we get people to see this movie, is how can we get people to feel something in this marketing campaign? How can I get people to say, oh, that's a really cool, I don't know, you looking at your Roku TV right now, that's a really cool screensaver. Will that make them want to go potentially see the Barbie movie? It just might. You can look at the screen right now and be like, damn, I forgot about that Barbie movie. What's going on with that Barbie movie? It's about intentionality, moving into the spots that most people don't move into normally during a film rollout. How on your screen, there probably wasn't Spider-Man anything. It probably wasn't Oppenheimer anything. It is just it's that intentionality, man, and thinking about where your audiences are, where in all of that having to do with marketing. So yeah, bro, I just think they understood the intentionality part of it, and they ran with it and they beasted it.
Yeah, this marketing blitz on behalf of Warner Brothers and Mattel has been inescapable. You literally cannot go anywhere. You cannot watch anything without seeing something Barbie related. To your point about the toy company, they did work collaboratively together, Mattel and Warner Brothers, and that is the intangible aspect of this that you can't really purchase that. The fact that this toy company has been doing this for such a long time, and now they have to reach outside to people and find a way to make you feel like you belong to this movement and to this moment in really creative and fresh ways. And then you just go again to the organic stuff, the stuff that you just can't pay for, the people that just naturally gravitate towards this, the online trending stuff. I mean, Barbie Core was trending on TikTok for months and months leading up to this. Like, you have those moments, and then you have those sort of out of home executions. Just the box that sits in an AMC theaters, all of a sudden that becomes a huge photo op. One person that I know, she went on LinkedIn and asked, like, was there any marketing that actually instructed us to dress up, to like actively wear pink to the movie theater? And I really thought about that, and I was like, no, there wasn't a commercial or an ad or anything that told me, like, yes, dress up for Barbie, but just the idea of living in this world. And I think by osmosis, you just start to like think about that stuff when you see a box standee that resembles a Barbie box, you start to think like, well, damn, maybe I should dress up and take a picture. That might be kind of cool. And then you see a step and repeat. And then you start to see like the fashion moments, because now it is that perfect storm of all these different elements, all these different media that can be played off of. It's the games, it's the music, it's the fashion, it's the toys, it's the resort things that you can do, the vacations and all. I mean, it becomes an entire lifestyle to a degree that many movies don't really get to experience that type of level of just being able to blow something out to such a large degree. So, man, many people are going to be looking at this as a how-to for a very long time to come. Unfortunately, they won't have the advantages of Barbie, because it really is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take something that has been so beloved and so well known and then translate it to the cinematic experience. Now, on the other side of things, that doesn't mean that Oppenheimer and Universal has been a slouch. Now, they have not done nearly the amount of things that the Barbie campaign has done, nor should we expect them to. Two completely different movies, and the way that they're going to run and operate their movies are going to be very different, especially when it comes to marketing. But Chris Nolan and what he brings to a studio anytime he markets a movie is special. The guy is one of the rare directors who will literally drop a teaser a full year out. I remember we saw the Oppenheimer teaser a full year ago, and then you get the countdown clock, and the countdown clock is actively updating in real time. I mean, we went to the movies countless dozens of times over the past year, and that damn countdown clock standee is sitting over in the corner, and it's ticking. It's ticking every fucking day. It ain't stopped at all. And then you get exclusive footage. You get the IMAX drops. I remember they released the exclusive footage with Avatar: The Way of Water. This is what Chris Nolan does. He makes his movie feels like an event every time he comes out, even though this is just supposed to be a biopic that's a drama. It's not this huge, epic, big action movie, or it's not a superhero film, but he's making it feel like a big deal. I mean, Chris Nolan's name is almost like an IP onto itself. You know, that's how crazy and celebrated he is as a director. That's how well known he is. What do you think about just the fact that they've been able to build the anticipation and then also leverage all of the hype and the anticipation around Barbie as well, because this all feeds into each other. They're obviously so connected at this point that his movie surely got a bump just based off of the performance of what they did with the Barbie campaign as well.
Yeah, Christopher Nolan is just really good at I'm sure there's very few directors still who will sit down and just probably talk to the marketing team, probably have some kind of plan of what you want to see look like, probably have a plan of this cutout in the middle of these AMCs with this clock ticking constantly, man. I'm sure he's one of the few people to do it. But I think when you are as celebrated as a director, it makes so much sense. And he's technically not, he's not a director. He's not coming out with a movie every year either, right? And I think that helps make it feel like an event, no matter what the movie is. You know what I'm saying? It really does feel like an event every time, especially before and after the Dark Knight, trilogy is going on. But when you do first hear about Tenet was, even the marketing for Tenet was like, everybody knew about Tenet. You didn't have to go see it, but you knew about it. You knew exactly. A lot of people don't even watch Christopher Nolan movies like that. I know they were like, oh, Tenet, the backwards whatever movie. I was like, yeah, John David Washington, absolutely.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's exactly what it was. And I'm like, this dude knows what he's doing, and it's just really great to see. Not only that, man, but there's something about to be said about, I think, the way in which this perfect competition did work out for Oppenheimer too. Both Barbie and Oppenheimer, to a degree, also marketed themselves. I think that is part of also how we end up wearing pink. I remember in TikToks and Twitters, what we wearing a Barbie, y'all. You know what I'm saying? That stuff plays a part too. And when you start to hear and see just I think how cool of a day or cool of a weekend it's going to be, that just helps with the marketing. No, people on TikTok didn't get paid to market Oppenheimer or Barbie. They were just excited and wanted to put some content out for themselves, and it ended up becoming that. And I think we're all a part of that. We're all a part of that demographic who helped market the movie themselves. I think that's a really cool idea too. But Oppenheimer kind of stands on its own because it did feel so different from Barbie. Of course, it definitely helped, right? It's freaking pink over here and a bomb over here is the most ridiculous thing in the world. But it just helps, man. It also helps that Oppenheimer just looks good. The trailer is just fire. To put it quite simply, that's also part of it. Oppenheimer just looked fire coming out the gate, and so I think that that definitely plays a part with everything going on. So yeah, it's it's once in a lifetime thing. Perfect competition is a real thing, but I think Christopher Nolan is really good at that. And I wish more directors did that. But I also agree in the way that you said Barbie's a once in a lifetime thing. Part of me feels like Christopher Nolan in a lot of ways is a once in a lifetime director that can really pull that off and say, I'm going to intentionally do this for my movies. Also, because I don't come out with a movie every year, you know what I'm saying? I'm able to do this. He can have all these demands for Universal to say, I need this, this, and this for this movie to work. A lot of people can't do that. So he also quite often feels like a once in a lifetime thing. So it's kind of hard to see if it'll ever be different or if anybody could ever replicate both Barbie and Oppenheimer today.
Yeah, the cachet that he has allows him to be able to do this and to flex these muscles, because when you go to a studio and say you have to spend as much on marketing as you will on the budget, and I'm asking for at least 100 million on the budget, well, we have to put those fucking spots and ads somewhere. So you couldn't really go anywhere without seeing an Oppenheimer ad. They put it in front of the biggest movies of the year. Like I mentioned, Avatar and Mission Impossible and Guardians of the Galaxy. You always saw the Oppenheimer ad, and then you had some opportunities here and there if you were avid of a fan enough to go to an IMAX screening of another movie to see some exclusive footage and to see the variations of the things that were happening. And then let's not underestimate Chris Nolan's ability to sort of stretch himself as well. I remember somebody sending me a video of him on TikTok. Somebody was recording him on TikTok talking about the advantages of IMAX, because we know he's a champion of IMAX. He's a proponent of that. And he talked about why it's such a unique way to film movies and why he is such an advocate for it. And you would never expect to see Chris Nolan, this British middle-aged white man on TikTok, but there he is. He's stretching himself to do something a little bit different and to reach an audience that he perhaps otherwise wouldn't. And so that was even an opportunity. And then you just get, again, all these other brands and all these other cinephiles that just feed into it. Every platform was talking about like, oh my God, have you heard the IMAX film print is going to weigh 600 pounds and these movie theaters are going to have to build new sections in order to even play the movie. That feeds into all this stuff. Just those conversations like, well, what? Like, this is crazy. Who does that? Chris Nolan does that. He's an event filmmaker. He's a once in a generation type of filmmaker that makes you want to pay money, get outside the house, and actually go to the movie theaters to see what he's going to offer up. But I also want to ask about this because the power of the double feature is also another big component to this whole conversation as well. I mean, people who decided to go watch these movies on the same day, you have to be a special type of person. This is like the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest when it comes to going to see movies at the theater, to watch these two back to back, because not only are they so different, but they're not the shortest movies ever. Barbie is a strong 2 hours, and then Oppenheimer is 3 hours.
Strong 3. Yeah.
Now, the way that we saw these two a day apart, about 24 hours apart. There wasn't really a strategy behind it. It was just kind of due to the nature of things. I mean, when Oppenheimer tickets dropped for IMAX, and we have the largest IMAX screen in North America here in New York City, we had to get those tickets as soon as possible, and showtimes were quickly filling up. And then when Barbie tickets dropped, I was on a plane to LA, and tickets were quickly filling up. So it just became a matter of like finding where you can fit in and just making sure you saw the movie. So it wasn't too much strategy behind how we saw them. But what do you think is like the optimal way to view these movies? Like, in case somebody hasn't done this double feature, or if they want to, do you see Barbie first and then Oppenheimer? Do you see Oppenheimer first and then Barbie? Do you watch them on 2 separate days? Do you maybe see one movie early in the afternoon, go grab a bite to eat, maybe get some lunch or a brunch, and then come back and watch another one later on? How would you split this up if you had to recommend somebody like the perfect way to experience these two movies?
Doubleheader in one day, period, is nuts to me. I don't know how y'all gonna get it done. I don't know how you do it. Because it's just crazy. So part of the Oppenheimer is long as hell, y'all. It is a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of talking. It doesn't make it a bad movie, but it can get sleepy, if that makes sense. And so it's just hard. So what I will say, if you are to do the double header for those people, I do vote Oppenheimer first, because I feel like Barbie's gonna wake your ass up. It's beautiful, it's bright, there's a lot going on. You're gonna be laughing. There's not as much slowness that exists in Barbie as it does in Oppenheimer. That being said, again, I'm not sure I suggest seeing both in the same day, because that is at least 5 hours taken out of your life of just movie time, not including trailers, you getting to the movies itself. It's a lot. It's a lot. So I don't know if I suggest that at all. But I think if I do, that's how I suggest it, man. I think so. I think that's the way to go. And I think if you do it the other way around, Barbie then Oppenheimer in one day, I'm not sure you're gonna make it. I don't think you're gonna make it. I think you're gonna be in the middle of Oppenheimer, and you're gonna be Barbied out. You're gonna be sleep, and it is what it is because the theaters are dark, and these movies are long, and yeah. So yeah.
It's a tough predicament. I mean, we do double headers often, but they're always strategically for shorter films. I mean, we
For
never
sure.
we never
Mhm.
actively go into a double header knowing that we're going to be facing possibly 5 or 6 hours of just movie. Like I would never do anything like that. I'm looking for like 2 90-minute, maybe
Mhm.
one's 90 and another one's like 100. That's a pretty minimal commitment if we have to do it that way. But this is an entirely different beast because in addition to the runtime of Oppenheimer, it's an emotionally taxing
It is.
movie as well. We're
Mhm.
talking about a real event in human history, probably the most catastrophic event in human history as well, right? Like this is not
Yep.
lighthearted subject matter. Barbie, thankfully, on the other side of the spectrum is. And so if I had to recommend the best way to do it, I would also agree seeing Oppenheimer first is the best way to do it. I would also advocate for taking a break in between. Like I would say
Yes.
leave the
Got to.
theater, go get
Mhm.
some food, go maybe grab a drink, go do something else for a little bit because I do think that you need a little bit of time to process what you've seen with Oppenheimer. I think you need to take some time to just let it sit with you because frankly for me when we walked out of it, I felt pretty speechless and it was late as fuck as well. It was like almost 3 a.m, but I didn't know how to necessarily comprehend all my thoughts. I needed time to just sit with the
Mhm.
movie. So I'd recommend going to do something. And then if you were to do a double feature on the same day, come back and watch Barbie later. So maybe you see Oppenheimer at noon, you get done at like
Yep.
3:15, 3:30, go grab some lunch, sit, talk about it for a little bit with some friends, have some time in between, then come back later for like a 6, 7 o'clock showing of Barbie, and you'll be back in the spirit of wanting to see a new movie. And like you said, it's going to wake you up. It's going to feel totally different.
Mhm.
You'll get all the music and the choreography. It's a great way to end off that day.
Yeah.
But ultimately, yeah, seeing them both in the same day is a strong ass commitment. Like you're literally going to be at it
It's a
all
lot.
day long. So you're asking a lot of yourself and whoever you're bringing along with you. But we should talk about this box office because that was the big story leading into this. A part of a cinematic showdown is, well, who's going to win? And we had our summer box office draft earlier this summer, and we talked
Mhm.
about the box office prospects of both of these movies and who we thought were going to win and walk away with the crown. Now, we both picked Barbie at the end of it, but the tracking for these movies has just done something that is incredibly rare, that
Yes.
almost never happens. I think the tracking for Barbie started around the range of about 55 to 60 million. Oppenheimer started even lower at about 40 to 45 million. And just
Mm.
in the days and the weeks as we got closer and closer to the release, those numbers just ticked up and up and up. And things were reaching a fever pitch. And by the time we reached the weekend, people were talking about Barbie might cross 100 million. Then it might cross 110 and 120. Oh, now we're looking at it possibly being the biggest opening of 2023, period, surpassing the Super Mario Brothers movie, which came in at about $146 million. And that's just like,
Mhm.
nobody would have called that. Even the studio came out and said, we were expecting Barbie to make somewhere in the range of $75 million. Well, turns out not only did it win the weekend, but it absolutely crushed all tracking, all projections. This movie brought in $162 million
Ooh.
domestically between US and Canada. In the rest of the world, it brought in an additional $182 million, now sitting at a global total of $337 million. Now, conversely, on the other side, again, Oppenheimer, started off relatively low, about 45 to 50 million, still respectable, still a really good number, still strong for Chris Nolan as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
We're talking about a 3 hour R-rated biopic for goodness sakes. Like, let's not forget the context. But then it essentially doubled its projections and ultimately walked away from the weekend with $82.5 million domestically. It brought in another 93 from the rest of the world for a $174 million global total. Now, this is all very noticeable for a few reasons. One, as I said, Barbie has now achieved the biggest domestic opening weekend of any film in this year, but it's also the biggest opening ever for a movie based on a toy. It's the
Wow.
biggest opening weekend for a movie that isn't a superhero film, isn't a sequel, and isn't a
Mm.
remake. So when we
Oh my
say
God.
original, it is now at the top of the mountain for something that doesn't have any remake or sequel tendencies or attributions that can be pointed to it. This is an original movie for all intents and purposes, and it's the biggest. It's the biggest opening ever for a female director, and it is just crushing and doing incredible business. And then you look at Oppenheimer, this is now the biggest non-Batman opening for Christopher Nolan. So this is just in
Wow.
third place after The Dark Knight Rises and The Dark Knight, which both had bigger openings. And then you look at the two in totality and what they did for combined business. This now sits as the fourth biggest overall domestic box office weekend in history, bringing in more than $300 million industry wide. That's also with other films that came out. There's the Sound of Freedom movie, Mission Impossible still in theater. So when you put in those totals, we're looking at one of the biggest weekends ever. And it's only behind those opening totals of those massive crossover films like Avengers Endgame, Infinity War, and also Star Wars The Force Awakens, which led their box office charges with just astronomical numbers. So this is history. This is just insane what this has done, now becoming one of the premier events, the motion picture event of the year by far, and both of them are doing incredible business and have exceeded all expectations. So I just want to ask you, how do you react to this? What are your key takeaways? What overall do you feel about just the massive financial earnings of both of these movies?
It's kind of insane, man. I knew that this would be a big weekend, but for some reason, I just wasn't expecting all these records, I think, to be broken. I was expecting, I think, maybe records in the end, but not the records in the beginning, if that makes sense. I didn't know opening weekend was going to be like this. It is insane. You could open your phone right now, or maybe earlier today. I just remember opening my phone earlier today and looking at the goddamn seats of the theater at 11:30 on a Monday is nuts. Are y'all niggas not working? Like, what? Are we taking off for Barbenheimer?
I think we are.
We are taking off for Barbenheimer because there is no reason 11:30 show of Barbie on a Monday should be completely packed. It's actually nuts. And Oppenheimer's the same way. In fact, I really want to see these movies again, right? At some point. I don't know when now at this point, because I thought I was going to be able to see it. Hell no, I ain't going to be able to see this movie again because the seats are gone. Like, if you want to go see it, it's almost impossible to see the damn movie again. I don't know when it's going to happen. I really want to see both again. There's no seats. And it is so crazy to me that there's no seats. And that doesn't usually always happen, especially for the movies we go see. You already said we go to the biggest IMAX in North America, blah, blah, blah. We'll go see a big movie and like, okay, cool, let's run it back. And usually we can sneak in there and run it back. Usually we have a chance. There's no chance. There is no opportunity for us to run on a Monday. What is going on? Monday is usually like, oh yeah, we can go to the movie. Tuesday even. Oh yeah, we can go to. It can't be done. And I have a feeling it's going to be like this for a couple weeks as well. And so, again, I seen opening weekend being like, oh yeah, booked, busy, Barbenheimer. For it to come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and it to be booked like it's a fucking Thursday and Friday is nuts to me. And so it's just, to be honest, all of this makes me really happy. First and foremost, is like people are going to the movies. That's why we're here. You know what I'm saying? I'm so happy that people are going to the movies. I'm so happy this event is a thing. But I really love these numbers, man. It's showing that it's more than just people are going to the movies. It's that original content can thrive. You can't tell. You literally just said all those things about Barbie it being the first. It's telling me original content can thrive. And it's also proof to me that all these studios need to stop talking all this bullshit about, it's time to remake this thing. Nobody likes original content. There are caveats to that. Some of that is true. But at the end of the day, you can't tell me it's not possible because Barbenheimer, both back-to-back original, right? Never been done before, not sequels to anything, just showed us that they can have some of the best opening weekends for movies ever. Come on, bro. It's just, there's no more excuses is what I'm trying to say. There's no more excuses. And so I'm just I'm just happy. I'm elated to see Barbenheimer be like this because I'm not saying they just saved the movies, but it feels like a part two. You know what I'm saying? It feels like a part two of the movies might be back. We kind of got a little bit of a glimpse with it last year with like Top Gun, you know what I'm saying? Again, even Across the Spider-Verse is like, oh shit, we back in the movies. This is like almost a stamp of like all this shit is possible and that we're here to stay in the movies, bro. It all makes me pretty happy.
Yeah, I mean, what started as what we called sort of a petty rivalry born out of maybe jealousy, maybe some spite, has now turned into this mutually beneficial phenomenon for both of these films to overperform and to bring in some of the biggest box office takes that we've ever seen. And you talk about that idea that the movies are back, because that is such an important thing when we have come off of a slew of movies that are dramatically underperforming. And it makes you question, like, well, what do people really want to see? Because none of this is making sense anymore. Like, on one hand, the most reliable franchise machine in the history of Hollywood, Marvel, which seemed impenetrable for a very long time, for at least 10 years there, started to take some licks on the chin. You see Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania dramatically underperform. You get other movies recently like Eternals or Shang-Chi or whatever they release, and it's like, well, wait, what's happening here? This doesn't feel like the old Marvel. Of course, they have a few wins here and there, like Guardians of the Galaxy does really well, but that's also the third of a trilogy that's closing out a particular chapter for those characters. And then you see these other more reliable franchise machines come out that typically would do exceptionally well, like Indiana Jones or Mission Impossible. And it's like, we're looking at them like, well, wait a second. Y'all aren't bringing in the numbers that I thought y'all would. What's exactly happening here? And I think that both Barbie and Oppenheimer are examples of, if you give people a reason to show up, they will. And that's exactly what both of these movies did. They both have propositions to say, you have to come see this. This is a moment that you can't miss. Now, a lot of that is due to the fact that they have coexisted on the same day for the past year plus. And so there's been this build up and this anticipation. But even if you separate the two, if they did come out on separate weekends, they probably wouldn't have done the extraordinary business that they both did. I still think Barbie would have performed exceptionally. I still think Oppenheimer would have brought in very, very strong numbers. But even separately, these are two movies that you feel like you need to see. Chris Nolan gives you a reason to go to the movies. He talks about IMAX and filming on film and having this really incredible Trinity sequence scene that's going to recreate the actual scene from 1945, and stacking his cast with an incredible ensemble. And then Barbie, the marketing machine behind that, and just the experience of living with that, creating this pop culture moment. Both of these movies had reasons to go see them. And I think the studios have to be credited for that, because they are offering those chances and those opportunities that we haven't quite seen. You know, you look at Warner Brothers, they take a lot of their movies that on the surface wouldn't seem like these big moments. I'm thinking about an Elvis, which overperformed last year. Dune feels like a moment. Other films like Crazy Rich Asians, A Star is Born, like they always find these really original ideas or original adjacent ideas and make moments out of them. And then the recent run that Universal has been on has been incredible for all of the unique films that they're making, all the genre stuff that they're doing, from Cocaine Bear to Renfield to Megan, like these moments that you feel like you have to go see and experience. And so you get the perfect storm of these two things coming together. And now they're walking away with just all the money in the world. And as you said, you cannot find a showing. I've had so many people text me like, fuck, I should have got my Oppenheimer tickets weeks ago. Hell, I'm thinking the same thing for the second and third viewing. We should have booked them bitches up when they were on sale.
We should have hella booked them hoes.
But we had no idea that it was going to turn out this way. I couldn't have predicted that you literally on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you still cannot get into any showing for these movies, because people are just finding every seat possible to go check these films out. Another thing that I do want to talk about this, though, is the importance of also premium large format screens. We've seen the increased importance of these screens over the past few years, because naturally these premium formats like IMAX and Dolby, the theaters get to charge more, therefore bringing in more revenue. Right now, Universal and IMAX struck a particularly unique agreement for Christopher Nolan, in which Oppenheimer is pretty much going to be exclusively playing in IMAX for a full 3 weeks, which almost never happens. I mean, we go to our IMAX theater here in New York City very frequently. And especially in the summer season, we're seeing movies rotate out on a weekly basis, because there's just so many big blockbusters coming out, and they're going to gravitate towards the movies that are going to make the most money for them in that particular weekend. So we just, naturally see a swap out. Now, this caused a little bit of contention, because recently Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 came out a week ago and got booted out of IMAX because of this deal between Chris Nolan and Universal and IMAX. And there were reports going around that Tom Cruise was calling movie theaters, reminding them like, hey, y'all, did you forget that a year ago I helped save theaters with Top Gun Maverick? You're going to kick me out of IMAX screens? Like, what's going on here? But they have to acquiesce to Chris Nolan, who's been a champion for the format and pretty much made it mainstream with the invention of it in narrative storytelling, with the inclusion of it in movies like The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. Like no director had ever done that before. So IMAX has a partnership with Nolan that is particularly special. But what do you think about that? Just the fact that other films are also starting I guess, somewhat suffer because Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 fell 64%. So it doesn't have as long legs as the most recent installment. And in fact, it came in fourth place this weekend. It didn't even crack third. It got beat out by The Sound of Freedom, which is like the smaller independent movie coming out of nowhere that's making like over $100 million domestically. It's the surprise hit of the summer. So what do you think about just the importance that PLF screens play in that? Because Barbie can't even play in IMAX because of the agreement between Nolan and IMAX, but it can still get those Dolby screens in addition to that and still bring in more money.
It's the battle of the movies, man. You know, us talking about what it means to go head to head. I think this is the real war. I think movie studios usually play, and I think it's harder right now because these IMAX movies are kind of playing back to back. You know what I'm saying? Like, it is hard to battle these things, right? Imagine, I'm trying to think of some directors here. Imagine Steven Spielberg is going up against Christopher Nolan, right? For a big ass IMAX movie. That's battle of the studios. You know what I'm saying? That's when you start to question, should I move my movie? Is this date correct for me? That's when I feel like you got to play politics at that point. That's when you got to, and for me, I think hearing about this is Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Could Tom Cruise in camp, could they have put together something in their head that was like, maybe Barbenheimer is something we should stay away from? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. They're just questions, I think, that you have to start asking when it comes to this, because that is now that's the thing. Maybe Mission Impossible should have still been playing. Maybe Regal Cinemas should have had been playing in IMAX for, you know what I'm saying? Maybe that's the play. I don't know. I think there's something creatively now, though, that studios have to think about when battling for these premium format screens. You know what I'm saying? There has to be an extra degree of like, oh, IMAX is, everybody's making a movie in IMAX now. What do we do? And so that has to be part of the reason I'm staying away from Avatar. I'm not touching it because, you know, damn well they're not kicking Avatar out of nothing when Avatar is out here. You know what I'm saying? They're not kicking out of anything. And I think the same thing can be told for Christopher Nolan. To be honest, of course, Barbie is doing what it's doing. It's doing great. If it wanted to be an IMAX, there's no way they would have done it the same weekend as Christopher Nolan. You know what I'm saying? The IMAX champion. And so now I just think it is becoming a little bit more of a game in that way. And when it comes to Mission Impossible, part of me does feel like maybe they should have moved their date, as we talked about, used to be the thing that studios did. Was it Tom Cruise having too much hubris? Was it the studio having too much hubris and saying this movie's going to do well enough before those movies comes out? You know what I'm saying? Is it that? And if so, what is the thinking there? You know what I'm saying? What did you think was going to happen? And so, yeah, now I'm just like, it's kind of on y'all a little bit. You knew Barbenheimer was happening at some point. You know what I'm saying? Maybe move your movie a couple weeks. It just is. That's what we have always done. Don't be hard-headed about it now. You know what I'm saying? But I think that's the game that's kind of being played, or has to be played now, if IMAX is getting bigger and better.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I love Tom Cruise as a movie star. I think what he's been able to do, especially over the past couple of years, is tremendous. Top Gun Maverick made over $100 million just based off of IMAX screenings alone. And so there is a legitimate reason to say we need those screens for as long as possible, because that's where we're going to make a good chunk of change. But I think a part of this is a little bit of the overestimation from the part of Paramount and maybe Tom Cruise of thinking that the momentum from Top Gun Maverick would carry over to Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. It didn't quite do that. We didn't see the same effect of people turning out for Mission Impossible as they did with Top Gun. Top Gun, again, another very unique proposition, another once in a lifetime sort of experience that it's really hard to replicate. They tried, but you can't necessarily get it to that same level. And then also, in addition to that, it's the underestimation of Barbenheimer, because to be fair, nobody saw this coming. Nobody saw these movies performing how they did. But at a certain point, you do have to stop and ask yourself, like, well, we know Nolan cannot move. There's an agreement in place. IMAX is going to side with him because they should. You know, Nolan has done more for IMAX than any other American director. So it's only right that they fulfill that obligation. And so you might have to really consider switching release dates. Maybe we should move it up or move it back. It's already a crowded season, but coming out within 1 week of each other, it's going to put you in a very, very tight predicament. I remember even checking to possibly see Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning for another time. I remember checking for IMAX showings on the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday before Oppenheimer released on Thursday, because that's typically when they would switch it out. And it wasn't even playing on those days. And I suspect that the reason it wasn't playing is because those goddamn projectors had to get ready for the 600-pound, 11 miles of film that they needed for Oppenheimer. So now you go from having 7 days to practically having 5 days to accumulate money from IMAX. It's just not enough time to make that kind of business. And so when you look at it just mathematically and strategically from all those perspectives, you got to say, damn, we might need to move it. Now it's Monday morning quarterback. And so, we can all look back and say like, yeah, just move it. Maybe it's a lot more complicated than that. I'm sure it is, but it's a huge effect. And we see that these PLF screens play a very pivotal role in how a film is going to perform at the box office, especially when you speak to legs, because I think now we're in a place where people, if they can't see a movie in a premium large format because filmmakers and studios are telling us, well, this is how you have to see it. You have to see it on the biggest screen possible. I think people will be like, okay, bet. I'm not going to go see it because if I can't see it in IMAX or if I can't see it in Dolby, I don't want to see it on a rinky-dink regular screen. I'll wait for it to come home. I think they will actively avoid it. So if you can't get tickets to Oppenheimer in the next 3 weeks, people are probably just going to be like, you know what, I'll wait. I don't want to shortchange myself. I'll watch it at home, which, that is kind of shortchanging yourself, but you don't really have any other option at that point. You know what I'm saying? So I think we just see like how important these screens have become. But man, everything around this Barbenheimer phenomenon is just absolutely extraordinary. Again, as we said, I think this is going to be a case study for cinemas. One last question I want to ask you before we move on to our reviews. Now that we see that this has worked, this has become incredibly successful. They're pulling in just so much money. It feels like the movies are back. It feels like theaters are winning and cinema is winning. I want to ask you, what do you think the wrong lessons are going to be that studios take away from this? Because we know what Hollywood is going to do. They're going to see a trend and they're going to be like, oh shit, we got to replicate it. Let's copy that. Let's do it again. Run it back. Do you think that there's a wrong lesson to take away from all this? Like what could be maybe a cautionary tale of like, well, you can't necessarily just replicate it. You can't just drop 2 movies on the same day and expect it to become this phenomenon. If you had to identify something that might be the wrong lesson to take away from this whole internet craze, this whole Barbenheimer craze, what do you think that might be?
That a different nostalgic IP is going to work the same that Barbie worked. That you can't come out with a Furby movie and expect to do what Barbie just did. It's just not.
No,
it's not going to go down like that. I don't think it's going to work. Not only that, I think another bad decision that a studio is going to make is the war. I think another studio I think it's going to happen again sooner than we think. Barbenheimer is a whole thing. We just talked about it. Somebody's going to say, "Oh, that movie comes out when? Bet we're going to come out with a movie on the same day." It's not always going to work like that. I think that's a wrong lesson that a studio is absolutely going to take. They're going to say that Perfect Competition went crazy for them. It could definitely go crazy for us, especially if the property is, let's say, like a medium kind of feeling property, right? Big spoiler alert here if you haven't seen Transformers. These niggas are talking about G.I. Joe. Anyways, imagine if G.I. Joe is trying to come out on the same day as fucking, I'm make up something up, Doom Part 3. You know what I'm saying? It's just not going to work the same as I think as you think it's going to work, because the things surrounding this film, or these 2 films in particular, are just it's just a one-off. Like we're just not going to get this again. You read off some of the other examples earlier of things we got, Mamma Mia and Dark Knight and all those other movies. Those worked-ish. You know what I'm saying? They worked-ish. And I think we shouldn't be looking for it to work-ish. We should be looking for it to work in general. And I think people are going to strive for Barbenheimer when they really should just focus on themselves. And I think those are some of the things I think the studios are going to take away, and they're going to be tearing that thing up, especially the nostalgia IP piece. Oh my God, if I see some old toy movie pop up and it's going to try to be woke and funny, I am going to throw my something out the window. I don't know what I'm throwing out the window, but it's going out the window. But I just know it's coming. I can feel it in my jellies, man. And it's going to be so annoying. But yeah, those are some of the things I think is going to happen.
Oh, it's definitely coming. We'll talk about that as well, especially from Mattel themselves. They're Mattel probably themselves. The first ones that will admit their plans for the future. But I agree about that. You can't just take a toy and think that it's going to do this incredible business. I mean, we've seen movies that have not worked, that have been just standard translations of an IP that is toys or toy adjacent or game adjacent, whatever it might be. Like there was the Smurfs movie. Like nobody talks about the fucking Smurfs movie. Like
That's true.
I'm sure it was a copy and paste of whatever the fuck it was. What wasn't there an Angry Birds movie? That's a game, you know. But it's
There
like
was.
you can't just expect that the stuff is all of a sudden going to become a phenomenon because, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about these two movies. They also have to be good. And I think that we'll both walk away with our reviews saying like, yeah, these are really good movies. And so that's
Yeah.
a huge component to it. Like they actually have to be
That's true.
something that's worth people going to see. Like you can't just put out
Mhm.
shit and think it's going to turn into a great thing. I think people coming into these films kind of expected they would be really good based on the pedigree of the filmmakers, based on the marketing, based on what we know about the IPs respectively, whether it's Barbie or an Oppenheimer as a person. Like we are somewhat familiar with the stuff. And so there was an expectation like, well, this has to be good too. Like we want this to like actually deliver and be a quality film going experience. And so that's a big lesson and takeaway as well, that you can't replicate that always. Like if you got a shit movie, all you can do is put lipstick on it, but it's still gonna look like a pig at the end of the day. So we'll definitely have to see what the trend looks like, but I definitely feel a sea change in the midst of Hollywood that we'll likely experience for the next few years. But